The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber slid open with a deep rumble that echoed through the crystalline halls. Ambassador David Kane stepped into the vast amphitheater, his footsteps seeming impossibly small against the polished floor that stretched before him like a frozen ocean. Above him, the ceiling disappeared into darkness, while around him, hundreds of alien forms watched from tiered seats that rose in perfect circles toward the shadows. Kane had studied the files, memorized the protocols, and prepared for this moment for 3 years, but nothing could have readied him for the sheer weight of alien attention pressing down on him like a physical force. The air itself seemed thick with tension, crackling with the electromagnetic fields generated by dozens of different life forms, each more impossible than the last. To his left, the towering forms of the hegemony delegation loomed like living mountains, their stone-like skin gleaming under the chamber's ethereal light. Their leader, Supreme Commander Thane, watched Kane with eyes like burning coals, each the size of a human head. To his right, the ethereal luminary floated in their containment fields, beings of pure energy that had transcended physical form millennia ago. Their spokesman, if such a term applied, communicated through patterns of light that hurt to look at directly. But it was the figure at the center of the chamber that commanded attention. High Chancellor Nixara of the Void, touched, sat upon a throne that seemed to bend space around itself. Her species had evolved in the vacuum between stars, and her presence warped reality in subtle ways that made Kane's eyes water. When she spoke, her voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once. Human, the Chancellor's voice resonated through dimensions Kane couldn't name. You stand before the collective judgment of 47 civilizations. Your species has been observed, catalogued, and found concerning. Kane straightened his shoulders and looked up at the assembled representatives. He had trained for this moment, had rehearsed his words 1,000 times. But as he opened his mouth to speak, a low alarm began to sound throughout the chamber. The holographic displays around the chamber's perimeter flickered to life, showing tactical readouts that made Kane's blood run cold. 12,000 points of light surrounded Earth's solar system, each one representing a warship from the assembled fleets of the Galactic Council. The largest military force in recorded galactic history, aimed directly at his home. As you can see, Supreme Commander Thane rumbled, his voice like grinding stone, we have taken precautions. Your species' recent technological developments have been deemed a threat to galactic stability. The quantum manipulation devices you call consciousness bridges violate 17 separate interstellar treaties. Kane felt his heart racing, but forced his voice to remain steady. Commander, with respect, those treaties were written before humanity even developed written language. We weren't party to negotiations that happened while we were still discovering fire. A ripple of what might have been amusement passed through the chamber. The Luminary's representative pulsed with colors that the translation matrix rendered as sardonic laughter. Your ignorance of galactic law is not a defense, Chancellor Nixara intoned. The consciousness bridge technology allows direct mental interface with quantum computers. In the wrong hands, such devices could rewrite the fundamental constants of local spacetime. We cannot permit such weapons to exist. Kane nodded slowly as if considering this for the first time. I understand your concerns, Chancellor. Truly I do. The power to alter reality itself is terrifying. He paused, looking around the chamber with the expression of someone coming to a difficult decision, which is why I'm curious about your choice of positioning for the fleet. Supreme Commander Thane's massive form shifted slightly. Explain. Kane reached into his jacket and withdrew a small device that looked remarkably like an ordinary smartphone. Several of the more militant species representatives tensed, but Kane held up his free hand peacefully. Just a communication device. Standard Earth technology. He activated the screen and his voice carried clearly through the chamber as he spoke into it. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, this is Ambassador Kane. Are you monitoring the council proceedings? A woman's voice crackled through the chamber's audio systems with startling clarity. Hello, Ambassador. Yes, we're watching. The fleet formation is quite impressive. Very textbook. Chancellor Nixara's form seemed to darken the space around her throne. What is the meaning of this? Kane smiled, and for the first time since entering the chamber he looked completely at ease. Chancellor, you mentioned that consciousness bridge technology could rewrite the fundamental constants of space-time. You're absolutely correct. What you may not have considered is that we've been aware of your fleet's approach for the past 18 months. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien voices, translated into a dozen different languages simultaneously. Kane waited for the noise to die down before continuing. "Dr. Mitchell," he said into his device, "would you mind explaining the probability matrix to our hosts?" "Certainly," came the cheerful reply from Earth. The consciousness bridge technology doesn't just interface with quantum computers. It allows human minds to directly process quantum probability matrices. We've been running simulations of this exact scenario for over a year. Supreme Commander Thane leaned forward, his massive hands gripping the arms of his throne. Simulations of what? Of 12,000 ships arranged in the standard Galactic Council battle formation, positioned at exactly the distance your fleet currently maintains from our solar system. Dr. Mitchell replied with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather. The formation is quite logical from a tactical standpoint. Overlapping fields of fire, distributed command structure, multiple fallback positions. It's almost exactly what we would have chosen. Kane nodded appreciatively, which made the probability calculations much simpler. Dr. Mitchell, what's the current status of the quantum entanglement field? Fully deployed and stable, Ambassador. We achieved quantum lock with all 12,000 vessels approximately 4 minutes ago. The consciousness bridge network is standing by for activation. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the chamber's ambient energy systems seemed to have quieted, as if the station itself was holding its breath. Chancellor Nixara's voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. "Quantum lock?" Kane's smile widened, though his eyes remained cold. "Chancellor, you are absolutely right to be concerned about consciousness bridge technology. When a human mind interfaces directly with quantum computers, we can indeed manipulate the fundamental constants of space-time. What we discovered, quite by accident actually, is that quantum entanglement works both ways." He gestured toward the tactical display showing the fleet. "Every ship in your armada contains quantum-enabled components. Navigation systems, communication arrays, weapon targeting computers, all of them operating on quantum principles, all of them now quantumly entangled with our consciousness bridge network." Supreme Commander Thane's voice was barely controlled rage. "You're threatening the entire fleet?" "I'm demonstrating a point," Kane replied calmly. "You came here to eliminate what you perceived as a threat. But you made the same mistake that every advanced civilization makes when dealing with a developing species." "Which is?" Chancellor Nixara asked, though her tone suggested she was beginning to understand. Kane looked around the chamber, meeting the gaze of as many representatives as his human physiology allowed. "You assumed we would respond predictably. You assumed we would either surrender in fear or fight conventionally. You never considered that we might have spent the last 18 months preparing for exactly this scenario." Dr. Mitchell's voice filled the chamber once more. "Ambassador, the quantum field is holding steady. All fleet systems are within our influence range. Awaiting orders." Kane held up one finger, never taking his eyes off the Chancellor. "One moment, Doctor." He stepped closer to the center of the chamber, his voice carrying clearly to every corner of the vast space. "Members of the Galactic Council, I didn't come here to threaten you. I came here to offer you a choice. You can continue to view humanity as a threat to be contained, in which case you'll discover just how creative we can be when our survival is at stake. Or," he paused, letting the implications sink in, "or you can recognize that any species capable of quantum entangling 12,000 ships without firing a single shot might have something valuable to contribute to galactic civilization." The chamber remained silent, but Kane could feel the shift in atmosphere. Fear was being replaced by something else. Calculation, consideration, perhaps even respect. Supreme Commander Thane was the first to speak. "What do you want?" Kane smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. "What we've always wanted, Commander. A seat at the table, recognition as a sovereign species, and perhaps most importantly, a chance to show you what cooperation can accomplish when it replaces intimidation." Chancellor Nixara's form seemed to stabilize, the space around her throne returning to normal geometry. "And if we refuse?" Kane's expression didn't change, but his voice carried a weight that made even the luminary's energy patterns flicker. "Then, Chancellor, you'll discover what happens when 12,000 quantum-entangled ships suddenly find their fundamental constants." The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened exactly 6 hours after Ambassador Kane's departure. The chamber's atmosphere had shifted dramatically. the casual confidence of the assembled representatives replaced by urgent whispers and frantic communications with homeworlds. The tactical displays now showed not just the positions of the 12,000 ships, but the growing realization of their helplessness. Fleet Admiral Rex of the Hegemony stood at his command podium, his massive frame trembling with barely contained fury. His species had built their civilization on military superiority, and the thought of their entire fleet being held hostage by a species they had dismissed as primitive was almost incomprehensible. "The quantum readings are consistent across all vessels," he reported, his voice grinding like stone on metal. "Every ship in the combined fleet is showing signs of quantum entanglement with an unknown source. Our scientists estimate that any attempt to break free would result in catastrophic system failures." Chancellor Nixera's form flickered with patterns of distress that warped the space around her throne. "How is this possible?" "Our intelligence indicated that human technology was centuries behind our own. Clearly our intelligence was flawed," interjected High Counselor Zed of the Ethereal Collective. Her species existed primarily as patterns of thought and energy, making her perspective on consciousness-based technology particularly relevant. The humans appear to have taken a completely different approach to quantum manipulation than any civilization we've encountered. The chamber's central hologram shifted, displaying detailed analysis of the quantum signatures emanating from Earth. The data was unlike anything in the Council's databases, showing patterns of entanglement that seemed to operate according to principles their scientists had dismissed as theoretical impossibilities. "They're using organic neural networks as quantum processors," High Counselor Zet continued, her energy patterns brightening with what might have been professional admiration. "Instead of building machines to manipulate quantum states, they're directly interfacing human consciousness with quantum systems. It's elegant, efficient, and completely unprecedented." Supreme Commander Thane's burning eyes fixed on the display. "Elegant or not, they have threatened the entire Council fleet. This cannot be allowed to stand." "Have they?" The question came from an unexpected source. Diplomat Vex of the Centauri Union, one of the youngest species in the Council, rarely spoke during major sessions. Her people had achieved interstellar travel only 300 years ago and still remembered what it felt like to be judged by more advanced civilizations. "Chancellor," Nixara's attention focused on the young diplomat. "Explain." Vex stood carefully, her blue-skinned form tiny compared to the massive beings around her. "The human ambassador made no threats of destruction. He demonstrated capability, yes, but he specifically mentioned that the quantum field would decay naturally. They're not holding our fleet hostage permanently. They're making a point that could destroy 47 civilizations' worth of military assets," Admiral Rex growled. "Could it?" Vex asked quietly. "Or could it do something else entirely?" The chamber fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. High Counselor Zet's energy patterns shifted to deep contemplation. The ambassador mentioned altering fundamental constants, not destroying the ships but changing how they interact with reality itself. "Which could be far worse than destruction," Admiral Rex pointed out. "Or far better," Vex countered. "What if they're offering to share the technology rather than use it as a weapon?" Before anyone could respond, the chamber's communication systems activated with an incoming transmission. The holographic display flickered and resolved into the image of Ambassador Kane, sitting in what appeared to be a simple office on Earth. "Good evening, esteemed council members," Kane said with a slight smile. "I hope you don't mind the interruption, but I thought you might have some questions." Chancellor Nixara's form stabilized with visible effort. "Ambassador Kane, we are evaluating your proposal, of course. These are significant decisions that deserve careful consideration." Kane leaned back in his chair, appearing completely relaxed despite holding 12,000 ships hostage. "I thought you might appreciate some additional information to help with your evaluation." Admiral Rex stepped forward, his massive hands clenched into fists. "Human, your actions constitute an act of war against 47 sovereign civilizations. Explain why we should not respond accordingly." Kane nodded thoughtfully. "Admiral, that's an excellent question. Let me show you something." He touched a control on his desk, and the chamber's display shifted to show a new set of readings from the quantum entanglement field. "These are the current quantum signatures from your fleet," Kane explained. "As you can see, we're not just monitoring your ships. We're enhancing them. High Counselor Zet's energy patterns flared with sudden interest. Enhanced how? Your navigation systems are now operating with quantum precision that exceeds their original specifications by approximately 400%, Kane replied. Your communication arrays have been quantum entangled with our network, giving you instantaneous communication across any distance. And your defensive systems have been linked to our consciousness bridge network, allowing for threat assessment and response at the speed of thought. The chamber erupted in confused voices as delegates tried to process this information. Kane waited patiently for the noise to subside before continuing. We're not holding your fleet hostage, he said simply. We're demonstrating the benefits of cooperation. Every ship in your armada is now more capable than it was 6 hours ago. The question is whether you want to keep those improvements or return to your previous limitations. Chancellor Nixara's voice carried a note of suspicion. And the cost of these improvements? Kane spread his hands in a gesture of openness. Recognition of humanity as a sovereign species with full council membership, access to galactic trade networks and scientific exchanges, and a commitment to revise the technological development protocols to prevent future misunderstandings. Diplomat Vex leaned forward in her seat. The consciousness bridge technology you mentioned, would that be shared with council members? Gradually, yes, Kane replied. We understand the concerns about such powerful technology. We propose a joint research initiative with safeguards and oversight committees to ensure responsible development. The goal isn't to create weapons, but to unlock the potential for consciousness-assisted quantum manipulation across all council species. Admiral Rex's expression remained skeptical. And if a species misuses this technology? Kane's smile became slightly sharper. Admiral, as you've just experienced, consciousness bridge technology creates inherent connections between users. Misuse becomes difficult when every quantum-enabled system in your civilization is potentially linked to every other user in the network. The implications were staggering. Not just enhanced technology, but a form of technological interdependence that would make large-scale conflicts virtually impossible. High Counselor Zet's energy patterns pulsed with excitement. You're proposing to fundamentally alter the nature of galactic civilization, she observed. We're proposing to help it evolve, Kane corrected. The current system is based on technological hoarding and military intimidation. We're offering an alternative based on shared advancement and mutual benefit. Chancellor Nixara's form flickered with what might have been thoughtful consideration. The council will need time to deliberate. Of course, Kane replied. You have 66 hours remaining. However, I should mention that several individual species have already expressed interest in bilateral agreements. The Ethereal Collective, the Centauri Union, and the Voidwalkers have all initiated preliminary discussions. Admiral Rex's eyes blazed with sudden alarm. You're attempting to divide the council. We're offering opportunity to those willing to embrace it, Kane replied calmly. The council can choose to evolve together, or individual species can choose to evolve independently. Either way, the old paradigm of technological suppression is ending. The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. The representatives faced a choice that would reshape galactic civilization. They could cling to the old ways and risk being left behind, or they could embrace a new model of cooperation that promised unprecedented advancement. Chancellor Nixara looked around the chamber at the assembled delegates. Fear and uncertainty were visible in every alien physiognomy, but so was something else. Hope. The possibility that they were witnessing not the end of their civilization, but its transformation. The emergency session will continue, she announced. We have much to discuss. Outside the chamber's windows, the 12,000 ships of the Council fleet drifted in space, their systems humming with quantum enhancements they had never possessed before. Humanity had not attacked them. Instead, they had offered them a glimpse of what cooperation could achieve. The question now was whether the Council would be wise enough to accept the gift. 36 hours had passed since Ambassador Kane's demonstration, and the Galactic Council chambers buzzed with an energy unlike anything in its 3,000-year history. Representatives huddled in species-based clusters, their communications arrays working overtime as they consulted with home governments, military commanders, and scientific advisors. But it was the reports filtering in from the fleet that had truly shaken the Council to its foundation. Every single vessel was performing beyond its design specifications. Navigation errors had become obsolete. Communication delays across vast distances had vanished entirely. Most disturbing of all, several ships had reported spontaneous, defensive responses to hazards that their crews hadn't even detected yet. Admiral Rex stood before a holographic display showing real-time fleet performance metrics, his massive frame rigid with barely controlled emotion. The data was undeniable and deeply unsettling. His species had built their entire culture around military supremacy, and now they were discovering that their most advanced vessels were operating like crude prototypes compared to their quantum-enhanced versions. The dreadnought Vengeance reported detecting an asteroid, impact 7 seconds before our sensors showed any object in the area, he announced to the assembled delegates. The ship's defensive systems had already deployed and calculated evasive maneuvers before the crew was even aware of the threat. High Counselor Zet's energy patterns flickered with fascination. Predictive quantum analysis. The consciousness bridge network isn't just enhancing your current capabilities. It's enabling your ships to process probability matrices in real time. Chancellor Nixera's form had stabilized since the previous day, though space still seemed to bend subtly around her throne. The implications are staggering. If this technology could be applied to planetary defense systems, early warning networks, resource management, the humans have essentially offered to upgrade our entire civilization, Diplomat Vex observed quietly. The question is what they want in return. As if summoned by her words, the chamber's communication systems activated once again. Ambassador Kane appeared on the central display, but this time he wasn't alone. Behind him stood a woman in a white laboratory coat and a man whose bearing suggested military training. "Good afternoon, Council members," Kane said with his characteristic calm. "I thought you might appreciate a more detailed explanation of what we're proposing. This is Dr. Sarah Mitchell, our lead consciousness bridge researcher, and General Marcus Webb, our military liaison." Dr. Mitchell stepped forward, her enthusiasm evident even through the holographic projection. The consciousness bridge technology represents a fundamental shift in how we approach quantum mechanics. Instead of using machines to approximate quantum calculations, we're using organic neural networks to participate directly in quantum processes. The practical applications are virtually limitless, she continued. Medical diagnostics that can detect diseases before symptoms appear. Agricultural systems that can predict and prevent crop failures. Transportation networks that never experience accidents because they can see problems developing minutes or even hours in advance. Admiral Rex leaned forward, his burning eyes fixed on the display. "And the military applications?" General Webb spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command. "Admiral, that's precisely the wrong question. Consciousness bridge technology doesn't enhance military capability in the traditional sense. It makes military conflict obsolete." "Explain," Chancellor Nixera commanded. "When consciousness-based quantum networks are properly implemented, they create what we call empathic entanglement," Dr. Mitchell explained. "Users don't just share computational resources, they begin to share perspective. It becomes increasingly difficult to view other network participants as enemies when you're literally sharing quantum-level cognitive processes with them." High Counselor Zet's energy patterns brightened to near-blinding intensity. "You're describing a form of technological telepathy." "Not telepathy exactly," Kane corrected. "Individual consciousness remains intact and private, but quantum entanglement creates a shared layer of reality that all participants can access. It's more like having a common library of experiences and perspectives that everyone can reference." Diplomat Vex raised her hand hesitantly. "What safeguards exist to prevent abuse of such technology?" General Webb smiled grimly. "The technology itself is the safeguard. Try to use consciousness bridge networks for aggression or deception, and every other user immediately becomes aware of the attempt. It's like trying to lie to someone while they're reading your thoughts. Which brings us to the real reason for today's communication," Kane said, his expression becoming more serious. "We're not just offering you enhanced technology. We're proposing to fundamentally restructure galactic civilization around cooperation rather than competition." The chamber fell silent as the full implications of his words sank in. This wasn't about technological advancement. It was about evolution on a civilizational scale. Admiral Rex's voice was barely controlled. "You're talking about the end of sovereignty, the end of independent civilizations. We're talking about the beginning of true galactic civilization, Kane replied. Individual species would retain their unique cultures, perspectives, and governance structures. But at the quantum level, all consciousness bridge participants would share a common foundation of understanding and cooperation. Think of it as a new form of democracy, Dr. Mitchell added. Instead of representatives voting based on limited information and personal biases, decisions would be made by participants who share a quantum-level understanding of all relevant factors and consequences. Chancellor Nixara's form flickered with what might have been uncertainty. And species that choose not to participate? Kane's expression remained neutral. Would be free to continue as they are. But Chancellor, I think you can see where that leads. As consciousness bridge technology spreads, participating civilizations will advance exponentially while non-participants stagnate. The choice is voluntary, but the consequences are inevitable. You're forcing us to choose between absorption and obsolescence, Admiral Rex accused. We're offering you the choice between cooperation and isolation, General Webb corrected. The same choice your council offered humanity when you assembled 12,000 ships to force our compliance. The difference is that our approach actually works. The projection shifted to show Earth surrounded by a network of quantum connections extending far beyond the solar system. We've already established preliminary consciousness bridge links with 17 other species, Kane announced. The Centauri Union, the Ethereal Collective, the Voidwalkers, and 14 smaller civilizations have agreed to participate in our pilot program. The chamber erupted in shocked voices as delegates realized that while they had been debating, nearly half the galaxy's intelligent species had already begun experimenting with human consciousness bridge technology. The results have been remarkable, Dr. Mitchell continued over the noise. Scientific breakthroughs that would have taken decades are being achieved in weeks. Resource conflicts have become virtually non-existent as participants develop quantum-enhanced understanding of sustainable abundance. Most importantly, the participants report unprecedented levels of satisfaction and social cohesion. Chancellor Nixara raised one of her forearms, calling for silence. Ambassador Kane, what you're describing sounds utopian. History suggests that utopias have a tendency to become dystopias. Kane nodded thoughtfully. Chancellor, you're absolutely right to be skeptical. Which is why we're proposing a gradual implementation with extensive safeguards. No species would be required to integrate their core consciousness networks immediately. We suggest starting with limited applications like the fleet enhancements you've already experienced. A trial period, Diplomat Vex suggested. Exactly. 5 years of gradual integration, with the option to withdraw at any time. Participating species would experience the benefits firsthand while maintaining complete autonomy over their involvement. Admiral Rex stood slowly, his massive frame dominating the chamber. And if we refuse? If the hegemony chooses to maintain our independence? Kane's expression remained respectful. Then the hegemony continues as it always has. We won't force participation, Admiral. But in 36 hours, the quantum enhancements to your fleet will fade, and you'll return to pre-consciousness bridge capabilities. The Admiral looked around the chamber, noting the expressions of his fellow delegates. Fear was giving way to curiosity, skepticism to cautious optimism. The humans had presented them with a choice, but they had also made the benefits of cooperation impossible to ignore. The hegemony will consider your proposal, he said finally. Kane smiled warmly. That's all we can ask for, Admiral. We believe that once you experience what cooperation can achieve, you'll wonder why it took so long to try it. The transmission ended, leaving the Council to wrestle with the most significant decision in galactic history. Outside, their enhanced fleet continued to perform miracles of coordination and efficiency, a constant reminder that the old ways of military intimidation had given way to something far more powerful, the promise of shared evolution. With less than 12 hours remaining before the quantum enhancement field would naturally decay, the Galactic Council faced its moment of truth. The chamber had been reconfigured for the final vote, with representatives arranged in a circle that emphasized equality rather than hierarchy. The ancient protocol of council, supremacy had been temporarily suspended at the request of several member species who insisted that such a momentous decision required complete democratic participation. Ambassador Kane sat at a small table in the center of the circle. No longer a supplicant before an imperial court, but a partner in negotiations that would reshape galactic civilization. Beside him, Dr. Mitchell worked quietly on a tablet displaying real-time consciousness bridge network data, while General Webb observed the proceedings with the calm attention of a professional strategist. The transformation in the chamber's atmosphere was remarkable. Where 3 days ago there had been imperial condescension and military posturing, now there was genuine intellectual curiosity and cautious optimism. Representatives who had barely acknowledged each other's existence were engaged in animated discussions about technological possibilities and philosophical implications. Chancellor Nixara called for order, her spatial distortions now controlled and purposeful rather than chaotic. Before we proceed with the final vote, I believe several delegations have questions for our human colleagues. The first to speak was philosopher Prime Keth of the crystalline synthesis, a species known for their rigorous logical analysis. His geometric form chimed with harmonic frequencies that the universal translators rendered as careful consideration. Ambassador Kane, our analysis suggests that consciousness bridge technology could lead to a form of collective consciousness. How do you prevent the loss of individual identity that such systems typically produce? Dr. Mitchell looked up from her tablet with evident enthusiasm. That's an excellent question, Philosopher Prime. The key is understanding that consciousness bridge networks operate at the quantum level, not the neurological level. Individual thoughts, memories, and personality remain completely private and protected. She activated a holographic display showing brain activity patterns. What we share through quantum entanglement are computational resources and analytical frameworks. Think of it as having access to a vast library that everyone can read from, but no one can read your personal diary. But surely there must be some bleed-through effect, pressed Counselor Trix of the Hive Collective, whose species had struggled with individual identity issues for millennia. Kane nodded understanding. There is, Counselor, but it's positive rather than destructive. Users report enhanced empathy and improved understanding of other perspectives, but their core identity becomes stronger, not weaker. When you're confident that your thoughts are your own, you're more willing to consider other viewpoints. Admiral Rex, who had been uncharacteristically quiet during the session, finally spoke. Ambassador, I have reviewed the performance data from our fleet. The improvements are undeniable. But I must ask directly, what guarantee do we have that humanity won't use this technology to dominate other species? General Webb leaned forward, meeting the Admiral's four-eyed gaze directly. Admiral, with respect, that question reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of how consciousness bridge networks function. Domination requires deception, secrecy, and information asymmetry. When all participants share quantum-level awareness of each other's intentions and capabilities, domination becomes impossible. In fact, Kane added, humanity would be the least capable of any species in the network to achieve dominance. We're the newest participants and have the least experience with quantum consciousness integration. If anything, we'll be learning from species with more advanced cognitive abilities. High Counselor Zet's energy patterns flickered with curiosity. Speaking of learning, what have you discovered from your preliminary networks with other species? Dr. Mitchell's excitement was palpable. The results have exceeded our most optimistic projections. The ethereal collective's energy-based consciousness has provided insights into quantum field manipulation that our organic brains never could have achieved alone. The Centauri Union's pattern recognition abilities have revolutionized our understanding of consciousness itself, and the Voidwalkers' experience with interdimensional travel has opened up possibilities. We're still trying to comprehend, Kane continued. Each species brings unique cognitive advantages to the network. The whole truly becomes greater than the sum of its parts. Diplomat Vex raised her hand tentatively. What about species that aren't technically advanced enough to contribute meaningfully to quantum consciousness networks? Every form of consciousness contributes something valuable, Dr. Mitchell replied immediately. Some of our most significant breakthroughs have come from species with relatively simple technology, but highly developed social intuition or emotional intelligence. The Harmony Singers, for example, have helped us understand quantum resonance patterns that our machines could detect but never truly comprehend. Chancellor Nixara's spatial distortions stabilized completely as she processed this information. You're describing a truly egalitarian system where advancement level matters less than cognitive diversity. Exactly, Kane confirmed. Which is why we believe the Consciousness Bridge Network could solve not just the technological stagnation that has plagued galactic civilization, but also the social hierarchies that have prevented true cooperation between species. The chamber fell silent as representatives contemplated the implications. This wasn't just about technological enhancement or even peaceful cooperation. It was about fundamental transformation of what it meant to be part of galactic civilization. Admiral Rex stood slowly, his massive frame commanding attention throughout the chamber. 3 days ago, I viewed humanity as a threat to be eliminated. Today, I find myself considering whether the hegemony should abandon 3,000 years of military tradition to join an experimental consciousness network. He paused, looking around the chamber at faces both alien and familiar. The data is compelling. The benefits are obvious, but this represents a leap of faith unlike any in galactic history. Kane stood as well, matching the Admiral's gaze despite the dramatic difference in their physical size. Admiral, 3 days ago you had 12,000 ships ready to destroy my homeworld. Today, those same ships are performing better than they ever have before. Not because we forced improvements upon them, but because we offered them. The question isn't whether consciousness bridge technology works, he continued. The question is whether galactic civilization is ready to evolve beyond the limitations that have defined it for millennia. Chancellor Nixara activated the chamber's voting system. The motion before us is formal acceptance of humanity's proposal for gradual consciousness bridge network integration, with the understanding that participation remains voluntary and that extensive safeguards will be implemented. All those in favor? The voting display lit up with unprecedented unanimity. 47 species, representing thousands of worlds and trillions of souls, had chosen cooperation over conflict, evolution over stagnation, hope over fear. Admiral Rex was the last to vote, his massive hand hovering over the control for several long seconds, before finally pressing the acceptance key. The hegemony votes in favor, he announced, his voice carrying a note of wonder that surprised even himself. Dr. Mitchell looked up from her tablet with tears in her eyes. Ambassador, the quantum field is stabilizing. Instead of decaying, it's strengthening. The Consciousness Bridge Network is accepting the new participants. Kane smiled, feeling the weight of 3 days of tension finally lifting from his shoulders. Then welcome to the beginning of true galactic civilization. Today we stop competing with each other and start cooperating with the universe itself. As the chamber erupted in celebration, the 12,000 ships of the combined fleet began transmitting new quantum signatures, no longer symbols of military might but harbingers of unprecedented cooperation. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy through force but had offered it a path to transcendence. And the galaxy had chosen to take the first step. 1 year after the Consciousness Bridge Accords were signed, the galaxy bore little resemblance to its former self. Ambassador Kane stood in the observation deck of New Harmony Station, the first facility designed and built through collaborative consciousness bridge engineering. The station existed in a stable orbit between 3 star systems, its impossible architecture defying conventional physics through quantum-enhanced gravitational manipulation. Through the transparent aluminum walls, Kane could see the transformation that had swept across local space. Trade vessels moved through corridors of folded spacetime, their journeys between star systems taking hours instead of months. Communication arrays pulsed with quantum-entangled signals that carried not just information, but shared experiences between worlds. Most remarkably, the ancient patterns of territorial boundaries had given way to collaborative zones where multiple species worked together on projects that would have been unimaginable under the old paradigm. Dr. Mitchell approached from the research section, her appearance subtly altered by a year of consciousness bridge integration. Her eyes held flecks of light that seemed to move independently, a side effect of quantum neural adaptation that had become common among regular network users. More importantly, her bearing conveyed the confidence of someone who had access to the collective knowledge and wisdom of 47 different species. The integration statistics are remarkable, she reported, though Kane could sense the underlying data through their shared quantum connection. 93% of Council species have achieved full consciousness bridge compatibility. Economic productivity is up 400% across all participating systems. Most importantly, we haven't recorded a single military conflict between network participants in 8 months. Kane nodded. though his attention was focused on the approaching vessel that had prompted this meeting. The ship was unlike anything in the galactic databases, its crystalline hull refracting starlight in patterns that suggested technologies beyond even their enhanced understanding. "The Andromedan delegation?" he asked, though he already knew the answer through their quantum connection. "Yes," Dr. Mitchell confirmed aloud, maintaining the human social convention despite their enhanced communication capabilities. "They've been observing our consciousness bridge network for the past 6 months. Their message indicated they have a proposal for us." The crystalline ship docked with New Harmony Station, using gravitational anchors that required no physical contact. Its airlock interface shifted and flowed like liquid metal until it achieved perfect compatibility with the station's systems. When the delegation emerged, Kane was struck by their ethereal beauty and obvious technological sophistication. The lead Andromedan stood nearly 3 meters tall, their translucent form containing swirling patterns of light that seemed to respond to their thoughts. When they spoke, their voice resonated with harmonics that conveyed emotion and meaning far beyond simple words. "Greetings, Consciousness Bridge Architects," the Andromedan said, their form brightening with what could only be described as approval. "I am Resonance of Distant Stars, speaking for the Andromedan Collective. We have watched your remarkable transformation with great interest." Kane stepped forward, drawing upon the enhanced diplomatic protocols that had been developed through Consciousness Bridge collaboration. "Welcome to our galaxy, Resonance of Distant Stars. We are honored by your visit and curious about your proposal." The Andromedan's patterns shifted to what the universal translators indicated was amusement. "Your Consciousness Bridge technology has solved a problem that has plagued advanced civilizations throughout the universe. You have achieved large-scale cooperation without sacrificing individual identity or cultural diversity. Most species," another Andromedan added, their form shifting through prismatic colors, "evolve either into collective consciousness that eliminates individuality or maintain individuality at the cost of meaningful cooperation. You have found a third path." Dr. Mitchell's enhanced empathy allowed her to sense the deep satisfaction radiating from the Andromedan delegation. "You've been searching for such a solution?" "For millions of years," Resonance of Distant Stars confirmed. "The Andromedan Collective achieved technological transcendence long ago, but we remained fundamentally isolated. Our attempts at consciousness integration eliminated individual creativity and spontaneity. Your approach preserves both collective wisdom and individual innovation." Kane felt a surge of pride that was immediately shared through the Consciousness Bridge network, amplified and reflected back by thousands of connected minds across dozens of species. "We're honored that our work has value to such an advanced civilization. How can we help you?" The lead Andromedan's form brightened to near blinding intensity. "We wish to learn from you. More than that, we wish to share with you the knowledge and capabilities of civilizations that have evolved beyond your current understanding, but only if you are willing to expand your Consciousness Bridge network beyond this galaxy." The implications were staggering. Dr. Mitchell felt her consciousness expanding as she accessed the shared processing power of the network to analyze the possibilities. "You're talking about intergalactic consciousness bridge connections?" "We're talking about universal consciousness bridge networks," the second Andromedan corrected. "There are 43 galaxies within reasonable quantum entanglement range that contain civilizations advanced enough to participate. Most have solved different aspects of existence that your species hasn't yet encountered. The Magellan Cloud civilizations have mastered time manipulation," Resonance of Distant Stars continued. "The Spiral Collective has achieved matter-energy equivalence. The Void Builders have learned to create stable universes within pocket dimensions. Each has capabilities that would be impossible to develop in isolation." Kane felt the Consciousness Bridge network humming with excitement as thousands of minds processed this information simultaneously. The possibility of learning from civilizations that had evolved along completely different paths was intoxicating. But he forced himself to consider the practical implications. "What would be required for such an expansion?" he asked. "Primarily the willingness to accept that your current understanding of reality is incomplete," the Andromedan replied. "Universal consciousness bridge networks operate according to principles that transcend individual physics. Participants must be prepared for perspectives that challenge their fundamental assumptions about existence itself. Dr. Mitchell accessed the collective wisdom of the network, feeling the input of philosophers, scientists, and leaders from across 47 different species. The consensus was remarkably unified, cautious enthusiasm tempered by appropriate respect for the magnitude of the decision. "We would need time to prepare our civilizations," Kane said carefully. The transformation from individual species to galactic consciousness bridge network took a full year. Expanding to universal scale would require even more careful preparation. Resonance of distant stars' S patterns shifted to what translated as approval, wisdom. The Andromedan Collective will provide guidance and support for your preparation. We estimate that full readiness for universal network integration could be achieved within 5 of your years. "And in the meantime?" Dr. Mitchell asked. "In the meantime, we will share selected knowledge and technologies to help your civilizations advance toward universal compatibility. Consider it a preview of what full integration could achieve." The Andromedan delegation began to glow with synchronized patterns that created a holographic display showing technologies and concepts beyond current understanding, faster than light travel that didn't rely on space-time manipulation, energy sources that tapped directly into the quantum vacuum, communication methods that transcended the limitations of space and time entirely. Kane felt the overwhelming excitement of the consciousness bridge network as thousands of minds processed the implications simultaneously. A year ago, humanity had faced the threat of destruction from 12,000 warships. Today, they were being invited to join a universal community of consciousness that spanned multiple galaxies. "The Council will need to vote on such a significant expansion," he said, though he could already sense the network's enthusiasm through their quantum connections. "Of course," resonance of distant stars agreed. "But Ambassador Kane, I believe you will find that consciousness bridge participants who have experienced the benefits of cooperation at the galactic level will be eager to explore cooperation at the universal level." As the Andromedan delegation prepared to depart, Kane reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. Humanity's desperate gambit to avoid destruction had evolved into an opportunity to reshape not just their galaxy, but their understanding of consciousness and cooperation itself. Through the observation deck windows, he could see the lights of ships from dozens of species working together on projects that would have been impossible under the old paradigm. The 12,000 warships that had once threatened Earth were now part of a cooperative fleet exploring the boundaries of KA.